Good evening. As you know, these monthly meetings, we try to get a speaker, a professional speaker, or one that's experienced, talking about a certain subject. Tonight you have me. I'm neither of those. I'm not experienced, I'm not a professional, and I don't even like doing this. So I was asked by Dennis to give a talk on fatherhood. I don't know how he talked me into saying, or how I said yes to it, because what a subject. I mean, look at all of you guys, you're probably all fathers, and it's like giving a talk on mothering to mothers or coaching to coaches. It's difficult. So whenever I decided, okay, what am I going to say? I thought, okay, I'm going to go to the statistics, the fatherless families and all of that kind of stuff. And boy, that's like drinking water from a fire hydrant. So I thought, no, I can't do it justice. I don't know. I don't have the time. I'm not really an expert in all of that. So I better just stick with what I know. And that's basically my own experience. So mostly my story. So what I did was I named my talk Fatherhood, One Man's Journey to Fulfillment, Joy, and Happiness. I've had a very rewarding fatherhood. I have two sons. Tell you about them. Jacob is 36. He's married to Janelle. They have three boys, Mark, Joey, and Gabe, and they live in the Festus area. And my other son, Will, is 3 years younger. He's married to Abby, and they have 6 kids. The oldest is 9. Then there's 8, 7, 5, 4, and 2. Jacob is a medical doctor, and Will got his MBA from Franciscan University and works with me. So they're doing okay. I grew up in Farmers Branch in Carrollton, Texas. That's kind of like Festus and Crystal City here. Farmers Branch in Carrollton's 35 miles north of Dallas. They're adjoining towns. I went to Catholic grade school. I went to public high school. I went to a state university in East Texas where I met my wife, Beth. After I graduated, I moved back home. I took a job with my hometown bank. A year later, Beth followed me to the area and we got married. We moved 10 miles north of my folks to a little town called Louisville. And then in 1985, we had our first son, Jacob. 3 years later, Will came along. At the time of our wedding, Beth was not Catholic. She joined the church shortly after our wedding, and she thought it was important that the family go to church together. Now, note that she thought it was important. I had no thoughts of that at all. We went to Mass mostly, but we went to a church down the street. I could hit it with a 4-iron, a good 4-iron. But every time we went, we fought. I didn't like the priest. There was something I just didn't like. And he didn't have any programs for kids and didn't want any programs. And in Texas, all Protestant churches have programs for little kids and for teenagers, either Sunday and Wednesdays. So I've always thought of myself as having common sense. So I thought we really should be going somewhere else. So we finally decided, I finally decided, we're going to go to this startup church, Coppell, Texas, 20 miles away, and that's what we did. Turns out my radar was correct, and I'll say about that little church just down the street in a little bit. Also turns out, at St. Anne's, I was on 3 capital campaigns, and I learned from that experience that 2,500 families from our area where we lived also had moved to St. Anne's, and they were some of the most active parishioners in the parish and the highest contributors. So it's a good example of how fatherhood leadership plays a big role, both positive and negative. Even though we moved to what became a great parish, I was still not the father that I should have been. It wasn't until 1993 when I was invited by one of my best friends to go with him to a gathering of men in Boulder, Colorado, that the direction of my fatherhood and my life changed. I was being asked to ride in a van for 18 hours with 11 Baptist men who I did not know to a place I'd never been before for a purpose I was not sure of, to participate in a gathering of men for Jesus. What a great thing to do, right? I did go, though. It turns out this was the second gathering of what was known as Promise Keepers, a ministry started by an ex-football coach at the University of Colorado. This gathering was to be held at Colorado Buffalo's football stadium. We drove straight through on the Friday before, and we arrived at the hotel in in Boulder, late Friday evening. We unloaded the van, moved to our rooms, 4 to a room, 3 strangers, and we went right to sleep. The next day we got up early, about 6 o'clock, and since we didn't have to be at the stadium until 8:30, we decided we would walk over to a cafe, have breakfast, and then just walk to the stadium from there, about 2 miles. While we were having breakfast, a huge storm came in, the kind of storm that's blowing the water up against the windows and you can't even see the parking lot. So we were thinking, this is going to be a horrible day. About the time we got up to pay, the skies were clearing up, and when we walked out, the most beautiful rainbow was just hanging just over the mountains in the direction we had to walk. So we walked 2 miles looking at this rainbow, and it was great. Everything felt crisp and clean, and there was a joyful excitement in the air. When we got about 1,000 yards from the stadium, we could hear singing. And as we approached in the parking lot, it got louder. And when we went into the entrance, we noticed that the stadium was about half full. So we moved to the area where we were going to be sitting. And as we got settled in, I looked up and the place was full. 55,000 men singing at the top of their lungs. It was just beautiful. For the next 10 hours, we listened to gifted speakers and fantastic music, and all of these men sang. I'd never experienced anything like that before. So when we left, I was still kind of in a daze. We got back to the hotel and we turned on the news, and of course they're covering it, and they covered it in the usual way. It was a right-wing, evangelical, woman-hater event. But they also said before the storm, there had been a large number of homosexual protesters at every entrance, but we never saw them. The storm washed them away. All we saw was the rainbow. So it's kind of apropos. It was pretty cool. At one point in the talks, really good speakers, one of the guys said, as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. And I thought, man, that's a good saying. I've got to remember that. Little did I know that's scripture, Proverbs 27:17. The next morning, we got up early at 3 o'clock and we headed back to Dallas. All the guys slept but me. I couldn't sleep. I was profoundly blessed by this Protestant event and was trying to make sense of it all. What was I to do now? I ended up going to 5 additional stadium-filled Promise Keeper events over the next couple of years, and I took my sons to a couple of them. The first one we went to, Jacob was 8 and Will was 5. They loved it. This Promise Keepers experience both strengthened my faith and contributed to some extreme doubts. It challenged me as a man. It caused me to question the Catholic faith, which turned out to be a game changer for me. I decided I needed to learn what the church stood for, what it taught, and why it matters. I had hundreds of questions. I didn't know where to start, but I was really mad, so I was determined. So I set out on a quest to understand the Catholic Church and how I knew this was the path to take and not just leave, I don't know. However, this is the path I took, and from the initial Promise Keepers trip until now, I've been on a journey to know God better and to love Him more. When I returned home, I started a Promise Keepers group at St. Anne's. I still don't know why Monsignor Broderick, a very orthodox and traditional priest, why he allowed me to set this up, but it turned out to be a blessing for me and many men of the parish. Our focus was on becoming better fathers. Additionally, I was on a mission to learn the faith, and I was blessed at the time, at this time with Protestant converts coming into the church at an accelerated rate. This was also during the pontificate of Pope John Paul II, so there was a lot of good teachings coming from him as well. For about 10 years after returning from that first stadium event in Boulder, I probably listened to 1,000 apologetic series tapes and read 250 books on faith, morals, dating, marriage, etc. As I learned more and more about the faith, I naturally began meeting more with involved Catholic men, which helped me in raising my sons. Having like-minded brothers in the faith really helps. It's invaluable even. I don't understand why the church has not promoted men's groups more, those that reach back to younger guys. Maybe that's what CTM is for. It's during this time that my life, during this time in my life is when I started formulating my theories about raising sons. For example, before this time, I used to think of myself as a provider, and primarily a monetary provider. But as I began to think deeper about it, through what I was studying, I started to understand that a father is a provider, a protector, and a teacher, and a leader, not just a monetary provider. That meant my job was to protect their bodies, their souls, their psyches, their emotions, their everything. And my job was also to provide the appropriate surroundings for their best outcome. I was to provide the best possible environment for them to grow. That meant the right schools, the right church, and so forth. But most importantly, I was to teach them the faith, lead them to heaven. I don't know if you guys know the statistics that if a child goes to church with only the mother and not the father, there's a certain percentage of those children that become churchgoers as adults. And then there's another statistic that if a mother and father, if a child goes to church with a mother and a father, those children become churchgoers as adults at another percentage. And then if only the father goes and not the mother, that's even another percentage. The first one, the mother only, it's 2%. And I'm a 2%er. Mother and father, I think it's around 45% of those children become churchgoers. But the father alone, 78% of those children become churchgoers as adults. We men have tremendous power when it comes to leading our children spiritually. I came up with a formula to help keep me focused, and it goes something like this. From the ages of 1 to 12, a father makes deposits in his authority into a credibility bank. And from 13 to 20, a father withdraws these deposits from the bank, teaching and correcting his teenagers. When my sons were small, I also adopted the stance of always saying yes to anything they asked, unless I could not. To say no had to have a really good reason. one that I could teach them with. That meant I couldn't be lazy. I couldn't say no because I was just not wanting to do it or I had something else to do. I mean, we've all said, I'd die for my kids, right? But the real question is, will you live for them? Will you sacrifice yourself? After a while, my boys recognized and started to realize that I would say yes to whatever they wanted unless it was not in their best interest. I can tell you this worked because I never had in their teenage years any arguments or any resistance to anything I asked them to do or told them to do. And actually, I think it helped them with peer pressure as well, because their friends knew that whatever I said would be it, because they never fought me. My desire was to father the boys with a soft hand and to let the world be the one that knocks them around. I was firm, but I tried to be gentle at the same time. I tried not to ever address them in anger. My goal was to raise modern-day knights, and I used the teachings of the church as I was discovering them, and in addition to the actions I was starting to take. I tried to instill in my sons virtue and honor and honesty and holiness. I began to look for what I call windows of opportunity. These windows would give me an opportunity to instill these traits, because you can't just give it to them. They've got to be in a position to receive them. Whenever there was an elementary school meeting that needed somebody to go, I would usually go. If there was ever a disciplinary issue, I always went. In high school, the coaches knew who I was, and they could call me by name. I even served on a committee to select the new athletic director and football coach in 2003. And this guy is still there. He's been to the state championship 9 times, and he's won 3 or 4 of those. My son Will was his quarterback the first year he went. I began to realize when they were still small that my job was to look at the horizon for danger and for opportunities. As my sons entered the teenage years, it dawned on me that my job was to provide clarity, especially with regard to girls, in what a gentleman is, and also how to become one and why. Here is where I really use the church teachings to help me. I'm sure they got sick of things that I would present to them, but they never showed it. Here's one example of something that I wrote to one of them. I looked through my old notes. I said to one of them, I can't remember who it was, I said, when a man is ready and is looking for a relationship with a woman, a wife, for a real man anyway, he is not looking to get from her his strength, his mission, or even his adventure. No, he should already have these. He is looking for a beauty, an alluring, competent companion to complete him. He is not looking for a leader. He is the leader. He is looking for feminine vulnerability, beautiful femininity in a woman who loves the Lord. He desires from this woman respect, admiration, devotion, and love to only Him. He wants to see in her looks toward Him all of these. Now, when I look back on that, I'd probably write it a little bit different, but to them, a lot of this resonated with them and helped strengthen them to want to be that guy. I also used to tell them, I said, be the captain of your ship. When you find the girl you want to marry, tell her, I'm the captain of my ship and I'm setting sail, and I would like for you to sail with me. But stay away from the woman that insists on being the captain. Obviously, I'm not politically correct. I'm going to read an email from my 19-year-old son when he was in Germany. Hey, Dad, did you get the email I sent you yesterday about my housing situation? As for my windshield, I didn't remember it being cracked. Was it big? He'd been over there for 4 months. That's awesome about the theater tickets and the Stars tickets, hockey stars. How'd you manage those? That's fine that you signed me up for the conference. I'm sure it will be good. That kind of thing always makes me nervous because I don't really know what to expect. So I'm glad you signed Jacob up too, smiley face. I don't even know what I signed him up for, but I did that a lot. I'm definitely getting my money's worth here. It's a great experience. The stress I'm feeling from several things, classes, that event in February, he put on an event at school where he brought in a national speaker and a band to put on a concert. It went real well. I really miss being around a lot of people that are not here. It's all helping me grow though. The internet is really slow here, but I'm trying to plan a trip this weekend. When they go to school over there, they always travel over the weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I've not looked at the design for the t-shirt Colleen did, but she always does a great job, so I'm not worried. He did a t-shirt for his concert that he put on. Yes, I'm doing my push-ups, and I appreciate that y'all are too. So I picked a time where he would be at lunch, and Jacob and I would be somewhere where we weren't sleeping, so we could pray for him while we did 50 push-ups, while he did 50 push-ups at that time. So he would feel that connection through prayer and through just us doing that with him. I'm trying to go here are the 10 characteristics of a modern day knight in no particular order. I probably asked him what these are. He says, strong physically, so he can be a defense from danger, more in his conviction, his character, his person than physically. Protective of women and children, spiritually, emotionally, physically, in that order. Considerate of others' feelings and the things you may not know about the person. A leader in his actions and necessarily in his words. Respectful, especially to women, no foul language or jokes in front of them, etc. Courageous, not afraid to tell the truth to anyone, no concern for his own personal comfort. Humble, there is a lot more honor in being humble than there is being boastful. Intelligent, must be mentally sound in order to take care of others. Ability to be docile so that you can hear God. Spiritually pure, receives sacraments regularly, reads the Bible, is a good moral example, etc. I read this just to highlight the response that my boys were, what they were learning from all these things that I introduced to them. I think a father needs to adopt a view of himself something like this. A benevolent dictator when the kids are small, then a dedicated coach as they get older, then an enthusiastic cheerleader as they leave the nest, then a trusted counselor as they move to married life, then a loving and supportive grandfather willing to give his wisdom. Because there are a lot of grandfathers here, I want to share something my son Jacob mentioned to me in passing the other day when I asked him to coffee. He says, I told him I had to give this talk, And he says, "Oh, Dad, you'll do okay." He says, "There was a king in England, Edward I, who wanted to have a well-trained army of longbow archers at a moment's notice. So the king outlawed sports on Sundays," you know, everybody worked the other days, "except for archery, because he knew that the grandfathers would teach the young men how to be expert longbow archers." That's where we grandfathers fit in. This struck me because in his own way, he was acknowledging my importance as a grandfather. It's just like him to do a backhanded kind of compliment. I could go on about fatherhood, tips and such, but the point is, all of us are fathers, and what we learn from each other is valuable. As iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. When you leave tonight and you're on your way home, ask yourself, what's special about my fatherhood? In your mind, start with your grandfather. What's special about my fatherhood to your grandfather? And then just work your way down. I did this thinking exercise that Mark Benson always does. Go to your grandmother. Go to your other grandfather, your other grandmother. Just work your way down. Go to your great aunt, your great uncle. Everybody that knows you as a father. And work your way down to your father and your mother and so forth. Your mother-in-law and your father-in-law, until you get to your kids and then to your grandkids. I think you'll find it's a long, long list. So I'll leave you with this quote from John Henry Cardinal Newman. He was a Anglican bishop, I think he was, around 1890, and he joined the Catholic Church and he became a cardinal. And he once said, God was all complete in himself, but it was his will to create a world for his glory. He is almighty and might have done all things himself, but it has been his will to bring about his purposes by the beings he created. I am created to do something or to be something for which no one else is created. I have a place in God's counsels, in God's world, which no one else has. Whether I be rich or poor, despised or esteemed by man, God knows me and calls me by name. God has created me to do him some definite service. He has committed some work to me which he has not committed to anyone else. I have a mission. Somehow I am necessary for his purposes. I have a part in this great work. I am a link in a chain, a bond of connection between men. He has not created me for naught. I shall do good. I shall do his work. I shall be an angel of peace, a preacher of truth, if I but keep his commandments and serve him in his church. That makes me think of fatherhood. Thank you.